Good evening, everybody. My name is Kim Heil. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of the Globe, and this is the Insights Seminar for One of the Good Ones. So we're so happy to have you here. I just want to acknowledge Vicki and Carl Zeiger, who are here. There they are. Thank you for sponsoring and supporting the Globe and sponsoring this program. We're so happy that we continue to do this. And I was actually just telling Gloria, some of you may remember, I worked here 20 years ago, and I would host the Insight Seminar 20 years ago, so I'm still here. But thank you to Vicki and Carl. I don't age. We don't do that. Anyway, I'm excited, as always, to welcome our guest to our program tonight. I'm particularly excited because I'm also a fan of this woman next to me. I'd like you all to welcome Gloria Calderón Kellett. So Gloria is an award-winning writer, producer, director, actress. I want to hear about that. And activist. And she co-created and co-ran the Emmy-winning One Day at a Time, which was on Netflix. She was an executive producer of The Horror of Dolores Roach. And she has written for shows such as How I Met Your Mother, iZombie, Devious Maids. She has appeared as an actress in shows like Dead to Me, Jane the Virgin, and she has directed for shows like Mad About You and Lopez versus Lopez. I mean, the list goes on. And of course, she is the writer of One of the Good Ones. And I have to tell you, it's been such a privilege and an honor to work on this show with Gloria, who is not just obviously a brilliant artist, but also just a spectacular human being who genuinely cares about the work and the theater and artists, and we'll talk more about how she's really put that into action. But I just want to start off by saying, Gloria, or asking you rather, what's your origin story? How did you even begin this journey?
Okay, origin story. I'll try to be fast. So I am the daughter of Cuban immigrants. And I start with that because it is such an enormous part of my identity. My parents came here in 1962. There was a program called Operation Pedro Pan that we don't study in school, but I wish we did. But it was during the Castro administration. 2 years where 14,000 unaccompanied minors came to Miami, Florida, and they were put in camps. And they were given food and water and blankets. And the plan was Castro gets out of Cuba, they go home. And they never went home. So my grandparents were able to come a year later on the Freedom flights. And Miami at the time was orange groves and farmland. And of course now it is a thriving population due to these 14,000 Cuban children and their parents that came. But of course they didn't have the infrastructure at the time for schools and apartment buildings and whatnot. So the diaspora, the Cuban diaspora, is very spread out all across the United States. My parents, both under this program, landed in Portland, Oregon, where I was born in this lovely, thriving little Cuban community amongst all the lovely white people. And it was great. It was great. It was great. It was a really beautiful place. It was the code switching was, there would be 200 people at my birthday parties, and then my friend invited me to her birthday party, and there were 6 little girls, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry nobody came to your party. Because I didn't know. And then when they'd come to my party, they're like, wow, everyone in the world is here? But it was lovely. And then when I was 14 years old, I moved to San Diego. And I went to University of San Diego High School, which is now Cathedral Catholic, but it used to be up on Linda Vista, overlooking the beautiful bay. And that's where I met my husband. And so really hugely changed my life coming to San Diego.
And how did you get into the world of television?
The world of television. Well, I think that, when you're a kid and you see actors on TV, you think they're making up the lines. So I thought, I want to be an actor. I'd like to be an actor. So I studied. I went to Loyola Marymount for undergraduate. And when I got out of school, I thought, I want to be an actor. I studied it, and I was very excited to be an actor. And every audition, I wish I was joking, was Gangbanger's Girlfriend or Gangbanger's Sister. That was all they want. I would be like, what? There's not like a school teacher or like a... social worker, best friend. No. Okay, so it'd be like, Julie, put the gun down. Órale. I mean, it was ridiculous. And it became very disheartening. And then I started looking on the other side of the table, and I thought, oh my gosh, maybe they don't know. Like there was one audition where I came and I didn't audition with an accent. I auditioned with my normal voice. And they said, oh, can you try it with an accent? You have to understand her parents came from somewhere else. And I said, my parents came from somewhere else. And my parents still have very thick Cuban accents. It's adorable. I don't think they want to get rid of them, if I'm honest. But they kind of looked at me funny. And I said, yeah, this is what it looks like when you're born here. You sound like, especially if you are in a culture where your parents are terrified for you. And constantly, and this is a line I say in the play, my mother always would say, don't talk like me, talk like the lady on the TV. Because they understood the power of the accent. So me speaking like this, me thriving in English and writing was very by design. They really, really wanted me to assimilate and thrive. And part of that, and also moving from Oregon to San Diego and seeing how Latinidad is different here, so close to the border, was really eye-opening to me, fascinating to me. So it was just something that I found interesting, yet I never saw it reflected on television, ever. And it blew my mind, especially because I really grew up loving like sitcoms. I loved all of those sitcoms where it's like a couch and you're invited into the home and you're laughing with this family and very special episodes. I loved all of it. And so when I was, theater is really the couch. Multi-camera sitcom is a proscenium and we just get to be the audience watching from our homes, but you're being invited in. So very quickly, I was like, I have to pivot. I have to help them, is really what I thought. I have to help them out. They don't know. So I started writing. So that was the start of it all.
But how did your family react when you said, I want to be an actor?
Oh, I'm very blessed. My parents are like, we came here for freedom, so do what you want, honey.
Oh, good.
They were always like, you just have to be the best. You got to do it. You got to be the best, though. So, when I brought home the awards, it's fine.
So when you went to college,
Yeah.
were you studying writing?
I was
or-
communications theater.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then I went to grad school. I went to University of London for grad school. I wanted to go to proper grad school, and I went there and studied Shakespeare and wrote a bunch of plays when I was there. I won 3 writing awards, which made me feel very, okay, I have like that affirmation that it's not just me. And then I came back here and nobody cared that I had a master's degree.
So what was your big break?
My big break was working for Cameron Crowe, who's also a San Diego native.
Yes, we know him
So
well.
yes, I was the second. It was such a funny time. I was looking for a job. I was working at Houston's, which is a great restaurant, if you don't know it. I was working at Houston's Century City, and I was looking for any sort of entry job, any sort of Hollywood job. And a friend of mine from Loyola said, hey, there's a writer that's very prominent. He needs a second assistant. I was like, what's a second assistant? And the second assistant signs for the packages, makes sure that the doors are open, that the fridge is stocked. It's not glamorous. But they wanted a writer because it is not glamorous. And it's a very lovely man, obviously. So I went to a meeting with Danny Bramson, who was the head of Warner Music. And I sat with Danny for an hour. And Danny said, he's going to like you. You start on Monday. And then Monday morning was my first day meeting Cameron. And I loved it. I worked there. He was unbelievably kind and generous. And it was Cameron who said, you write these plays. Have you thought about multicam? Have you thought about writing multicam? And it was him who said, you should think about that. You should think about multi-cameras. And that's when I started writing specs for multicam. And then I remember the day I went, I called him boss. I still call him boss. I said, boss, I got a job on a multicam. And he goes, oh, Glo, I'm going to miss you so much, but I'm so proud of you. And then just like a year and a half ago, there was something, because I'm very politically active. I was on MSNBC for something. And a few weeks later, I got in the mail a letter from Cameron just saying I was in the kitchen and I thought I heard your voice and I came out and I was so proud. And he's just a yummy person. So it was really wonderful.
That's wonderful. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Okay, so you discover, or rather you make the choice. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to pursue this.
Yeah.
But even then, did you encounter any resistance to your desire to
yes.
write for the Latina community?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Tell us about
well,
it.
look, for me, it was really about look, wake up in the morning and I don't think like another day in the life of a Latina woman. Here we go to live my Latina life. No, you wake up and you put your shoes on and you're hungry and you feel you got to feed the kid. We're just people. It's not until it's reflected back to me in some way that I even remember I'm a woman, right? It's not until I'm in a parking lot and it's dark and I'm scared that I remember, oh, I'm a small woman. Be careful. And Latino, it's not until, and I'm also passing. So people often are like, are you Italian? What are you, right? So people don't know. I don't scream. I don't have what in the community we call immigrant face, where like we scream what we are, right? I'm able to be in spaces where people sometimes say things in front of me that they wouldn't say otherwise. Wow. I was definitely, when I was looking for houses with my husband, we were very excited first time home. And I remember we were in Santa Monica and they were like, so you should know there are a lot of Latinos that live in this neighborhood. And I was like, well, that's good for me since soy Latina. Soy Latina, don't let me take I can go there, but I don't. And so making jokes has also always been the way that I've been able to break through. I think it is an alleviator of tension, and sometimes it really helps to make the medicine go down. So I got my first job. I was able to then work on many shows. I was on Quintuplets, then How I Met Your Mother for many years. Then I had 2 babies that are the joy of my life, and was able to go back to, oh my God, mixology. I've worked on so many shows. I've worked on 300 episodes of TV, tons of TV, and direct now as well, TV. And it's been wonderful. But I was very, and I wanted to do mainstream shows because that's what I grew up with. In fact, I remember when the year, a big pivotal moment in my career was I was offered One Day at a Time, or I was offered How I Met Your Mother as a staff writer, which is the lowest level. And I was offered George Lopez show, 3 rungs above, for a lot more money. And I thought, this is my first big job on a notable show. And as much as I love George Lopez, I also was younger and like all my friends were dating, so there was something a little bit more fun for me about writing for How I Met Your Mother. But I thought with Calderón, which I needed to have, when I got married, I was surprised. I was like, oh, I need my dad's name up there too. It's very important to me that my dad's name's up there. So I'm Calderón Kellett. But I was like, this is my first big job. And if I go to Lopez, they're going to think, oh, the Latina, of course she writes for George Lopez show. Whereas if I can crush it on How I Met Your Mother, I'm just a writer. So let's do that. So that was a big moment. And I ended up directing George years later. I was one of the house directors on Lopez versus Lopez. And George was like, I've been trying to work with you for him. I'm like, I know, George, I need to show them I could do it first. And now I'm here. But it was a calculated effort because I was concerned I would be pigeonholed. And so many of my friends were that are phenomenal writers that can write anything. And it's great to be in these writers' rooms because the writers' rooms were older white men. You know, so my stories had been told to me. It was like, oh, wow, I thought I needed to be like thin and blonde to find love. You guys were telling the stories. So now I'm going to set the record straight. Anybody can be in love. It's fine. But it was great because the conversations I had in the rooms with these men were wonderful. Really, really great. And I was very fortunate that in every room I was in, there were people that really listened and really understood what I was trying to do and really engaged with me. And so for those relationships, I am so grateful. And it was great to have these relationships where, you know, ridiculous things would happen that I would be able to call out. So we'd have, I remember there was a room I was in where there was a black character saying something and they're like, I don't know, does that sound right, Gloria? And I was like, did I just become a black man? I'm so confused. I don't know. How about we get a black man in here to write that part, right? Because I was often not only the only woman, but the only person of color in any of these spaces. So one day we had a really great talk where I said, because they were like, do you ever want to write your family? I said, I do, but I love them. So it's got to be like under great, I've got to feel very protective if I'm going to write my family. And they said, well, you know, let us know. And I said, well, you know what's interesting is that we grew up on dominant culture shows. I grew up watching Gloria Payne's. I can write your experience. You can't actually write mine. The specificity of it, you can write family, you can write, and we did. And when I was able to, when I was in the chair, I was able to get a room that was incredibly diverse. But yeah, I just knew very instinctually, oh, I need to be sitting in the driver's seat of these shows. And that was my journey, the 15-year journey of being a journeyman writer in other rooms so that eventually I would be the boss. And then Mr. Norman Lear made me the boss.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
He changed my life.
It's incredible. And now you have your own production company.
I do.
Right?
I do.
Glow Nation.
Yes.
I love that. I
Yes.
love that. So you must get we will get to one of the good ones, I promise. But you must get writers pitching you ideas, sending you scripts, that sort of thing. What do you look for now?
Well, here's the thing. So I make my own stuff.
Okay.
So I don't do outside. I think sometimes there will be something that I'm really drawn to that I get excited by. And I'll say, I would love to mentor this writer or executive produce this project, but it's very rare because I've been for 15 years waiting to do my stuff. So really, I just do my own stuff. When I'm staffing, though, what I look for is usually specificity of something in the space that I don't have. So, on One Day at a Time, when we did One Day at a Time, we knew we wanted one of the characters to have this coming out journey. And so I'm a cis straight lady, so I knew I needed to hire queer writers to write that story with authenticity and love. And so we were specially reading for queer voices specifically for that show. But it always depends on the show and what the needs are of the show.
And speaking of stuff that you make, so one of the good ones.
Yes.
You're having this brilliant TV career. What inspires you to suddenly say, I think I'm going to write for the theater now?
Well, I'd always wanted to write for the theater. It's funny because I've been making the joke. My husband makes this joke, like, you'll be a playwright as soon as you're a successful TV writer. You just have to do that road. You have to take that path. Because 20 years ago, when I wanted to write about my family, they were like, well, it's not a border crossing story, or it's not about like a gang life. And so they only wanted things that were rooted in trauma. And I was like, that's not what I want to write. I want to write like a great kitchen sink show, just happens to be a Latino family. And at that time, it was just a no across the board. So I was like, all right, I'll go and do TV and I'll find a way back. And so there was a writer's strike. And I love writing. I'm so grateful that I love to write. And so I said, hey, Danny, if you're serious, I will write you a play at the Pasadena Playhouse. He was kind enough to commission me. I was their first Latina commission in 99-year history of the Playhouse. And I wrote that play during the strike.
And what, what came to you in terms of, okay, now I want to write this? Like, what inspired you?
Honestly, it was, so One Day at a Time, still available on Netflix. You can still watch it. 3 seasons, still there, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Anyway, that's for my mother, because my mother would have done that if she was here, so I'll do that in her behalf. When I was doing One Day at a Time, and I'd have to do panels, you have to do a lot of discussion and panels and public speaking about your shows. I would not be asked about how I conceived of what my craft was. I was constantly asked about what it was like to be Latina in Hollywood. And I felt like a bit of a zoo animal of like, I am a Latina and I do have boobs and I write, like it was very strange. And then it was a lot of identity talk too. There was a lot of issue with, the show is about a Cuban American family because I'm Cuban American. The actresses on the show are also Caribbean, but they are Puerto Rican. So there would be Cubans that would be mad because they weren't Puerto Rican. And then there would be other people that were mad because they were, and that accent wasn't, and that all the conversations that I was having and having to navigate these different communities. Also, listen, it was Norman Lear, and I'd keep on saying, like, Norman, I hope I don't really blow it and you like go out without a bit. Like, I really wanted to uphold the quality of Norman Lear's work because I loved him and his work so much. My parents literally learned how to speak English watching Norman Lear shows. Like the switch of that became the thing that really gave me notoriety is still moving to me. So it was, I wanted to talk about identity. And I was also, Mike Royce, who's my frequent collaborator, he's like a lovely white guy who is my best friend and we write together a lot. And he would constantly be in spaces where he was a writer on Everybody Loves Raymond and a bunch of other shows. But he would say, oh, wow, I come in the room and I just have to be funny. And you come in the room with 52 things. And I go on panels and I just have to talk about how I created characters. You have to talk about, like, him and Norman both were constantly bearing witness and making me feel less crazy. And it was so healing that in any space we were in, not only did they see me, but they would pass me the microphone constantly. They were just the greatest men. And their support was humongous. So this play was like, I kind of want to write about identity and questions of what is American? We see so much about America and what is American and America being great and when was America great and was it great and what did that mean and what is it to be American? How are people identifying as what is really American, what is not really American? And there are things happening that also remind me so much of the stories my parents told me in Cuba in terms of arts and arts being cut and arts programs being cut. And, you know, my daughter is 17 years old and she wants to take some fun classes at Santa Monica City College this summer. She's in high school and she wants to take some college classes. She was like, where's my birth certificate? I'm like, you don't need your birth certificate. She's like, yeah, I do. I need my birth certificate and my passport to sign up for a class at Santa Monica College. Whew, right? So like, those things were all things that I wanted to sort of talk about. But I need to do, it's all heavy stuff. And I don't want the audience to tune out or feel like they're being made to listen to medicine, you know, like, so it's what is a fun trope that everyone can relate to. And it's bringing somebody home for the first time to meet your parents, right? So let's take this thing that we all know, that we can all identify with, being a parent, being a child, bringing someone home, being nervous, secrets, things that happen in your family, right? Let's take this thing that we all know and let's just see it through the lens of this family. They're affluent, which was very important to me. I feel like on the American stage, we are always poor and struggling. And I'm a rich Latina, so I'm going to write about that. Yes. We exist. And I really, really wanted to talk about these identity issues. I have parents that came from another country that were traumatized by that. So we did not talk a lot about their trauma growing up. It was la, 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 we're in America, things are happy, let's move forward. Let's not look back, let's move forward. So I also wanted to talk about what is it like when you're navigating identity, who you are in this world, what you have to say, what stamp you want to leave here when you don't know what your stories are. And then I wanted to sort of honor the conversations I have with like my husband's family, who is like Irish, Catholic, Polish, but he doesn't really know, you know, a lot of stuff, but like we don't, I remember my kids, my parents live across the street because I'm a good Latina daughter that bought them a house. And we do Cuban things all the time. For all the Cuban things we practice. And I was like, oh, we should do something for St. Patrick's Day. So I bought all the St. Patrick's stuff and my kids came down. This was like 5 years ago. They were like, what's this? And I'm like, well, you're also Irish. We are? We thought we were just Cuban. I'm like, no, you're also, this is a thing too. And, you know, and so it was like, oh, all of this. I want to talk about all of this. And I want to make it really funny. And I want everyone to be laughing together and hearing these words and going home. I mean, for me, the most exciting part is I'll tell you one of my secrets, which I won't do tonight, but I usually do. I hide in the bathroom because that's where you get the truth. And when people come out, I just sit in the stall and I listen. And those are the conversations that I love the most. You get to hear, oh, and then this happened. And then they're talking about their own things from their life and what they related to and what they saw. And that's just like my mom, but my mom was, you know. So that's the stuff that's so meaningful to me. And that's been so meaningful to me in the work I've done so far. Like, obviously, the Latino lens, I want this community to be seen, of course. But what means a lot to me is when people say, that reminded me of my Irish grandmother. That reminded me of my Russian grandma. Because that's what Norman and I really bonded over, is that specificity is universal. We love our families. Our families are complicated. We're trying our best. We're doing our best as being humans in this world and being kind to each other. And then I also wanted to talk about assumption. I think that often when there's plays about race, it's the white people that get the brunt of it. And so what does it look like when you see Latinos being racist or having making assumptions? It's because it's all complicated and we're all doing our best. So the people in this play are doing their best, but they're getting it wrong. But they're trying, and they're trying to grow, and they're trying to hear the things, and sometimes they don't want to hear the things. And it's what I think all of us are navigating at being human right now.
Yeah, that's lovely. Did you find it difficult, or was there just like a switch that you turned on in your brain? Like, okay, now I'm writing for the theater. It's different this way because, you know, et cetera.
No, I mean, well, one day at a time, Norman really came from the theater as well and loved the theater. We really both saw it as proscenium, right? It was like one big set and then maybe a couple swing sets. But for the most part, everything happens living room, kitchen. So we would have scenes in one day at a time that are 11 minutes. That's unusual for television. And so, no, for me, I did want to also sustain, like, it's 90 minutes, no intermission. It is the whole thing in real time. And there was something about the ticking clock of that, the waiting, the what comes out, all of that. So yeah, no, I just continued the conversation.
You mentioned earlier, well, you've been talking about how you do a lot of work on behalf of your community and on behalf of women. You are a natural activist in many ways, and I know right now, and something that we've talked about as a theater community, as members of the old Globe family, that right now it's tough, right, for theaters to continue to make theater, and the arts in general have been really threatened by the loss of funding, et cetera. And I know you have been very active trying to advocate on behalf of the arts. And tell us a little bit about your experience and how that's been for you.
It's been, for me, now I'm going to get real, here we go. You'll hear some of my stats. But I love going, so for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been going to DC. I go usually twice a year, and I speak with congressmen and women about the NEA and the importance of it. And I usually go with a lot of fancy actors, and they will often meet with us because they want a photo with, the guy that's in NCIS or whatever, Tim Daly or what, I don't know. And we will sit and talk with them about arts in their community. And, they get so many things. There's so many issues that people care about. And with everything going on in this country, of course the arts are like, do we need plays? Like, come on. But I'm there to remind them of a few things, which is for every dollar of the NEA, $9 go back to the community. That's proven, that's fact, science. Oftentimes in these poor and rural communities, that's the only programs that they have. And those programs often lead to children being better public speakers, better writers. All of these things lead to better job development. So many of the things we're seeing that people need in the workforce is creative thinkers, people that are able to think on their feet, people that are able to present their ideas in a clear way. After-school theater programs do that. So I believe strongly in the power of the theater. I also think with AI coming that there will be a rise of live theatrical events. I think that we want to be in community with one another. I think we want to sit and laugh together. I think we want to look at our neighbor and be like, oh my gosh, what did you have an experience like, right? We want to, especially after COVID where we were all far from one another. I think we want community. And the American theater has done such a wonderful job of holding up a mirror and having the ability to have real conversations about what's happening in our communities and things that we care about. So I feel very passionate about the importance of those programs and what they, in Hollywood, it doesn't matter. We're not there to make actors. We're there to make just people that are able to, if they're a doctor and they come home and let off steam by playing a piano or listening to music or drawing or, all of those things. My mother has Parkinson's and she now does a lot of sketching, and it helps as part of her therapy of color sketching and coloring in and just being artistic and allowing something else to take over. It's an important part of our lives that we should enrich. So I feel very passionate about it.
Well, I thank you for your advocacy. I think it's so important. It makes me feel a little bit more confident about our future when I know someone like yourself is doing
the
that.
other thing is I love the conversation. I'm about building bridges. My work builds bridges. I'm not interested in dividing. I just don't think it's productive. So I really love going to people on the other side of the aisle of whatever, because I grew up amongst many, I'm Cuban. So on the West Coast, we're all Democrats. All the people in Miami are all Republicans. We still find a way to sit at dinner, right? And so the conversations that get to be had there, I think are really spirited. And they can be difficult, but I think that if I worry that these kids, and I see this because I do a lot of speaking to young people, because of texting and because of the internet, they just kind of talk at each other, right? Like, I'm going to say this, right? As opposed to, oh, that's interesting. How does that shift or change anything I'm thinking or feeling? Okay, let me put that into words and then ask you some more questions. So there's something we're losing that I think we need to get back. And I think that being able to articulate your feelings and emotions and talk to one another and speak to people across the aisle is also really important.
Yeah. I will open it up to questions, but I do have one more question about how you envision sort of the future of storytelling, you obviously you have you are telling stories about families and about communities, but it feels also that you want to say something. You have a point of view that's very strong. Would you say that this current generation of TV writers, maybe playwrights, that you've seen people sort of heading in that same direction? I'm curious in particular about Hollywood, because I often worry that, when the things that you talk about, they're important to me too.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I turn on Netflix and I'm like,
listen, Tech Bros ruined everything. They did. They ruined everything. Netflix ruined everything. But anytime that there's a shift, I always try to find what's exciting about that shift, right? As a storyteller that wants to sustain telling stories, I have to find, what is this moment? Why are we binging things? Why are we? And I think it's because we are deeply alone and lonely and very much want some sort of connection, and nostalgia does that better than anything. But I'm also very struck by all of the studies about storytelling. Storytelling is vital. It is vital in every aspect of our lives. Storytelling wins elections. Who has the better story? Who is telling the most concise story? So there was a study done when Will and Grace came out, and they studied how long it took for the reverberation of culture, which is what I make, I'm a culture maker, to make it to DC to affect policy and change. 10 years. 10 years that it gets out there, and then people start talking about it, and then people go, my cousin's gay, and they seem all right, right? Like, all of that starts to reverberate through culture. So I think about my community, Latinos, and what's constantly on the air. We are still only 5% of what's on television, and that 5% is still largely stereotyped as gangbangers, drug dealers, right? So then, are we also more in jail? Yeah, the story becomes true. And then I think about my parents' journey here in 1962. 1952, number one show in America, I Love Lucy. A Cuban American is in your homes, and he's lovely, and he's great, and he's married to the silly redhead. Oh, a bunch of Cuban children want to come here? Okay. Yeah, they can come here because they're great. So I've benefited off of the story. So as a storyteller, it is vital that I continue telling the truthful stories of my community, as I know them to be, of these very lovely, hardworking, sweet people that I'm blessed to come from. My parents are the best people I know. And it would do them a dishonor and do my ancestors a dishonor if I didn't constantly talk about how wonderful they are.
Well, that is truly fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I want to hear from you all now. Someone's going to be coming around. We have a couple people with microphones. So if you have a question for Gloria, please feel free to raise your hands. Does anybody have any questions? I knew we just needed to encourage. Yeah. We have a few people in the front row. Let's start with you, and then we'll go over here.
Do you think?
Yes, it's on.
Do you think that the amount of time it takes to change the culture is speeding up?
No, because we are more siloed. So what Netflix did is we used to all watch ER on Thursday nights and talk about it the next day. So I think it's slowed down because we have siloed into watching just things in our echo chamber. So what that relies on is hits. That's why you're seeing IP-driven material. That's why it needs to be a number one book first, because everybody will then watch it. And then there's so much fear in Hollywood about storytelling. Seinfeld was a failure for 3 yees. Warren Littlefield just liked it. He just thought it was funny. The 4th year it took off and became the biggest show in the world. Same with Friends. We used to have time. Now, within they'll tell me, they changed the channel 2 minutes in. So without tastemakers saying, I think this is important, I care about this, I think it's supposed to be on the air, as soon as the computers start telling us what we're supposed to be watching, we're in trouble, right? So I'm always trying to tell people, if you love something, say you love it. If you think it's amazing and powerful, share it with your friends, because the story is important. The story is important. So sadly, no. But I'm hoping, because people are getting tired, and there's only so many Avengers, and people are getting tired of it. Star Wars now, it's like, really another Star, although Andor is fabulous. Also a Latino. Just saying. So I think that the more we're watching stuff together, the more I think things will shift again, and hopefully it can be faster.
Interesting. We had a couple questions right here. Yes. Right here. Thank you.
Hi. I could probably guess, you've talked about a few things, but I'm wondering what stories have we been working on that are reaching DC now, and what are we looking forward to talking about that we can get to DC and make some changes?
Yeah, I think right now it's the Yellowstone stuff is really hitting hard. I think speaking for people that have also felt left in the margins is like the middle of the country, that have felt like we are not New York, we are not LA, like what is not a coastal story. So I think, and by the way, I would love to hear a story about something happening in Arkansas. I have no idea what that life is, right? So I welcome diverse stories from different places. That's interesting to me. But I think the Yellowstone franchise is something that is really, and I think Taylor Sheridan's work is very good. We have different politics, but I think the work is very good. So I liked watching it. I've seen all of it. Because I only talk smack if I've seen it. But I can't talk smack. He's a good storyteller.
And I think there was a question right there.
How does your husband integrate himself into your crazy world?
Well, I've known him since I'm 16 years old.
Is he from San Diego?
He is from San Diego. He's a fellow artist. He's a cartoonist, a wonderful cartoonist who understands that. And he was actually, we did a lot of laddering because we met very early, and we were like, wait, I have to go live. I need to have many lovers and have an amazing life. I can't know you now. Didn't happen. One and only. He's my one and only. We met very early, and we both knew what we wanted to do, which is so rare. He knew he wanted to be a cartoonist. He's been in the Union Tribune. He has, I'll just pitch my husband's strips. They're fabulous. He has an all-ages strip called Sheldon, and he has Drive, which is a sci-fi series that's ongoing. Both are available for free. He does a lipstick model, which means it's for free to anybody who wants it. He wants anyone to have access to the work. And then if you're a true fan, you buy books, which we publish 2 of a year. And he also has a podcast all about comic strips that you should listen to because he's very funny and charming. But he gets it. And it was, for 2 years, I was working the jobs while he was trying to make things happen. And then we kept on laddering. Like, okay, now, and I remember he was working for Mattel Toys. He was designing toys and naming toys and coming home and doing the comic strip at night. And there was one day where I had been on TV for a year. We had enough in the bank. And I said, it's time to leave. It's time for you to do this full time. He was like, really? I'm like, yep. So he knows, and he's very supportive, and he's my eye candy. So he really looks good on my arm at these events. Very handsome guy.
Trophy husband.
It's my trophy husband.
We have a question right here.
Dave Kellett. His name is Dave Kellett.
Have you ever had to work with a younger person, maybe in their teens, who's an actor, maybe queer or different race, and had them help you work with a script for something that maybe really kind of fits their character?
Yes. So I had a show that you would love, I think, if you haven't seen. Have you not seen One Day at a Time yet? No, you got to see it. So One Day at a Time, literally, there's a coming out story. I think we're the youngest coming out story in history. We have a character there who's 14 years old who comes out over the course of the first episode and then has her quinceañera, which is also a big thing on the table, is the quinceañera. I did not have one for the same reasons. It's actually, my quinceañera story is what made Norman fall in love with me, he claims. Because we had just moved to San Diego. I moved here a week before my freshman year of high school. And my parents were like, you're going to have a quinceañera, right? And I said, well, I'm new here. And I've looked up the history of the quinceañera. And it was presenting the young women to the men of the town to say, well, she can have babies now, so who wants her? And I'm good not having that party. Thank you very much. Can I have a car instead? And so that story, we did it in the pilot of One Day at a Time, and that's the entry point to that. But yes, on that show, we have a lot of queer characters, and the writer's room, we hired a lot of queer people in the room to make sure that we were telling that story authentically. But I love working with actors, and so one of the actors was queer and one was not. And we constantly looked to them to make sure. Also, I just turned 50. I know, Latina patina. But I don't know how 16-year-olds talk anymore. I mean, I have a daughter, but, it's mostly grunting. No, she's great. She talks a lot. She'd appreciate the joke. So I love the collaboration with actors. I love the collaboration with all actors of all ages. I've also worked with my last show with Love. The first sex scene is the two 76-year-olds. And it was a conversation with them of they have sex in the bathroom during a party. And we talked a lot about what that would be and what that would look like. And they had never done sex scenes before, either of them. And it was very tame. It was very PG. But I love all of that because that makes me grow as an artist if I'm able to collaborate and listen to other artists. So I love it.
Any other questions? Let's see. I have a question, and I have 2 minutes. Oh, wait. And then I'll ask my question.
I just was at the day you guys all arrived, and you were up at Uni High School, you told me. So tell me a little bit about that and that whole experience here in San Diego.
Oh my gosh. Well, let me tell you. I'm going to be real. We did a tour. So we came here when I was in 7th grade. We took a trip to San Diego for spring break. And my parents were like, this reminds us of Cuba. This is what Cuba looked like, especially Balboa Park. They're like, this is what Cuba looked like. We love it here. What do you guys think of moving here? And no disrespect to Portland, Oregon. It is a lovely place. But when they took me to uni and I walked around and I saw those boys, I was like, yes, please. What? They all surf and they're gorgeous and let's go. So, uni, and it was like there was no uniform. Uni was like there was no uniform. People were like literally in shorts and flip-flops. The first year, because I graduated in 93, so 89 was the first year there, and I guess you guys had a drought. And I came from Portland. 9 months out of the year, it rains in Portland. There was one day where it started raining, and school stopped, and everybody went outside and was like, and I was like, what is this place? But it was so lovely. It was such a fun place to go to school. I loved the teachers. I loved the energy. I felt like I was in 90210. I mean, it was, our lockers were outside. And it was just such a wonderful 4 years I had there. And I still have all my friends still. Oh, it's Cathedral, which is like nicer than my college. So nice now. It's like, we had like falling apart. Everything was falling apart. The theater was the library and we converted it. Like it was not, it was so beautiful. But it was lovely. It was lovely to be there. It was lovely to, tell my teachers how much they moved me and how grateful I was for the time that I had there, and ultimately gave me my husband and my life. So it worked in a lot of different ways for me.
Well, my question is, you have a lot of projects. I saw your IMDb profile.
Oh.
You have a lot of upcoming.
Yes.
So your TV career, yes.
Yes.
But I want to know what's next for you in your life in the theater.
Oh gosh.
Or maybe a dream.
I have a couple of different things that I want to write. I think I still have a lot more to say about identity. I also have a lot more to say about assumptions. My next play is for I Am a Theater Company in Los Angeles, and it's a play about two couples and becoming friends, right? Like, who becomes friends at this age? Nobody does. You have your friend. I mean, making a new friend now is like insane. So it's about that, and then it veers into, it's a Latino couple and an Anglo couple, and over the course of the play, you realize that the Latino couple is super, super conservative Trumpers. And we don't see it through that lens very much, and I have a lot of family that is that. And so I wanted to speak to it not in a negative way, in a what are the reasons, I think people need to understand the nuance of what happens in the Latino culture when people are voting against their best interests. That's my opinion. Proximity to whiteness, the power of that, the story. And so I think it's going to be about that. It's going to be a night of dialogue where people assume things about each other. Again, people assume things about each other, but it's a couple. It's through the lens of two couples. And then I would like to write something about me coming up as an actress. There's a statement now called a no sabo kid. I don't know if you guys have heard about no sabo kids. No Sabo kids. So no Sabo kids are like Selena Gomez is a perfect no Sabo kid because she doesn't speak Spanish. And so when my Spanish is pretty good. I understand it fluently. I speak it okay. But I don't often do interviews in Spanish because I'm just not as articulate in Spanish as I am in English, which I'm embarrassed by. And there are people in the Latino community that get very upset that I don't speak perfect Spanish because they don't understand the complexity of why I don't speak perfect Spanish, because we don't talk about why. And I do a lot of advocacy, like I also am on the Women's History Museum Committee and the Latino History Museum Committee. We both have brick and mortars that just got passed. I'll probably be 100 before they open, but we're duking it out to be on the National Mall. But I went to Spain last year with a conglomerate. John Leguizamo and I went and spoke with a bunch of people, a bunch of museums that we wanted to build relationships with, so eventually they will lend us pieces, etc. And I didn't speak perfect Spanish, and this one guy was like, in Spanish, he said to me, "It's very upsetting you don't speak perfect Spanish, you speak the language of the colonizer," which is English. And I said, with all due respect, in the States, Spanish is also the language of the colonizer. And he was kind of blown away. He was like, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." I mean, none of that belonged to any of us. Like the Spaniards started slavery. The Spaniards did. So like there's complexity to all of it. And so if we're going to dig, if we're going to really look at our history and learn so we don't do it again, we have to talk about these things. And so that's what I'm really excited about.
Well, Gloria, it has been such a privilege to get to know you better. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm so excited for all of you to see one of the good ones. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night.